Hello, welcome back to Forever Young Adult Book Club. We are so happy to see you. We, as our teacher selves, took the month of August off so we could get our brains in order for online school. Woohoo! So we're back, ready to go, and I am going to go first. So my name's Katie, if you're a new viewer, and I am going to talk to you about a book called All the Stars and Teeth by Adeline Grace. So All the Stars and Teeth is it's a nautical book, which is kind of cool, I think. We don't have a lot of nautical YA themed novels, but it is set in a world in a kingdom called Visidia. And in Visidia, the main character, her name is Amora, and Amora is the princess set to inherit the kingdom. Now, everywhere in this world has magic, and Amora's magic she's going to inherit is soul magic. It's pretty violent. She takes body parts and uses like fingers and teeth to enact her magic, right? To read somebody's soul. Well, she's got this big ceremony set out to prove to her kingdom that she's worthy of taking over this job, the High Animancer. And the ceremony falls to pieces. So she runs away with this new-found pirate that comes to rescue her, and he reveals some pretty jaw-dropping news about the politics of this kingdom that directly involve her father. So she is, thrust into this notion that everything she's been told about her life is a lie, and in order to save her people, she has to throw caution to the wind and forget everything she's ever been taught. So, it's the first book in a series. The second one is coming. I don't think it's out quite yet, but I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Come on back to you. I would give All the Stars and Teeth 3.5 out of 5. It was kind of engaging. Amora starts out really as a kind of whiny, annoying character, but she grows on you as she goes through her own growth as a character. And then the adventure continues in book 2, I hope. It leaves you on a bit of a cliffhanger because it is the first book in a trilogy. So, and like I said at the beginning, it's a nautical themed YA, which is new and different and fun. So I'm always a fan of new and different and fun. So anyway, All the Stars and Teeth by Adeline Grace, 3.5 out of 5. And I'm going to send it over to my friend Adrian, who's up next.
Thank you, Katie. If you're a fan of magical realism, you'll love Romina Garber's newest book, Lobizona. It's the first in a planned duology. I have to admit, when I saw this, let me center it. I did what we're told not to do, and I judged the book by its cover, and that's why I originally picked it up, because it has such a pretty cover. I absolutely love the art style of the cover. The title also seemed really interesting because it kind of sounded like Lobo. It's also cool, the inside. I never take my jackets off, but the inside is also really pretty. It's as beautiful as the sleeve, and it glows in the dark, which I think is just really cool. I actually tested it out, took it in the bathroom and shut the door. Saw that it actually glows in the dark. So Manuela goes by Manu Azul. She lives a very small life in Miami. She has to stay hidden because she and her mother are on the run from her late father's family. They're a huge organized crime family in their native Argentina. That tiny life is shattered when her mother's arrested by ICE and her surrogate grandmother's attacked. So Manu finds herself on her own. She's without a home. The only clue that she has to her past is this mysterious Z emblem. And she finds this world connected to her late father and his criminal past. It's straight out of folklore, where the 7th consecutive daughter is born a witch and the 7th consecutive son is born a werewolf. She is the 7th daughter, but there's a slight problem. She's the first female werewolf. So that was actually a really cool kind of turn that I did not expect. The entire novel raises some questions on important issues like gender, sexuality, the complications that arise for Latin Americans who grow up caught between two cultures. In the same way that Manu and her mother tread between being Argentinian Americans, Manu must find a balance between her human and her werewolf side. As a reader, I love it when a lead character is also a reader. And books like 100 Years of Solitude and Don Quixote are read by the main character, Manu, during the book. These are by important and sometimes overlooked Latin American authors more people should know about and read. So by the end of the novel, I think the main themes would be gender, friendship, but more than anything, this book is about her listening to her gut and following her own path. Not only must the characters support and accept each other, they must learn to accept and believe in themselves. So I recommended the book. I give it a solid 8.5 out of 10. I decided to go to 10 today instead of 5. And I'm looking forward to the next one. I think there's gonna be 2 of them. And so now on to my friend Steve.
Hi, everybody. First book I'm going to talk about is All American Boys. This is co-authored by Jason Reynolds and Brendan Keeley, I think. I haven't heard of this guy, but I've been reading some Jason Reynolds books, and I was very pleased with this. Right off the bat, I'll go ahead and give it a 4 or 4.5 out of 5. Something that I've noticed with this book and other Jason Reynolds books, I'm going to talk about one later, is I think they're really good books for maybe reluctant readers. They just read really straightforward and honest and raw. And I think that appeals to maybe more the male reluctant reader type of young and teen readers. So that's a plus. This is an interesting, great book. It's relevant to right now, right this very minute of what is happening in our world right now. And I think that's important. It is a dual narrative. So like one character's chapters are Jason's, the other character's chapters are Brendan's. It's 2 guys, Rashad and Quinn. Rashad is a young African-American teenager who has a incident at the convenience store and is a victim of police brutality. That's the opening of the book. And Quinn is the other all-American boy, if you will, to play on the title of the, he seems to have it all made with being like star on a basketball team, well-liked, popular, white, all that, entirely different world than where Rashad comes from. So the dual narratives really serve a poignant purpose, not just let's just switch characters so we can get to know each character. This is all about those 2 completely different perspectives and worlds that these characters live in, but they all live in the same world where racism and all these things are going on. But so that makes it really relevant and poignant. And the progression of the book is Rashad recovering from the in the hospital after the incident, and Quinn and the whole school being conscious of everything that kind of unfolds after that. And as you see the 2 narratives unfold and everything comes together with the aftermath of what happened to Rashad. And I just think this is a great book. It's socially conscious of what is happening right now in our world with race. And it's just a great read. It just, both authors are great writers, and it just leaves you, the end of this book leaves you wanting to dialogue about these issues. And I think that's important. So I'm going to move this on to, I'm sorry, just the next reader. My list is messed up. Whoever's next, go ahead.
Okay, well, I think I'm next, Steve, though. Thanks. So I would like to talk about, hi, I'm Deborah, by the way. And I want to talk about a novel I picked up and read, and I had it on a Goodreads list for a while, and I finally got it at the library. So I didn't have high hopes, but I loved it. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. I don't give anything a 5 out of 5 stars, like nothing. But I gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars. So if I can present my screen, which is not always possible for me. This is what the cover looks at. The book is called The House in the Cerulean Sea, and it's by T.J. Klune. Well, first of all, I couldn't help but be attracted to somebody who uses the word cerulean in a title, because it's a really cool word. It means blue, and it's a certain kind of blue, but you don't see it very often. And so I loved it for that reason alone. And it's kind of an eccentric little fantasy novel. The characters are a little odd. The humor is a little dry. But I found myself pretty moved by it. I'm going to stop sharing. Hope everybody got a good look at it. So this takes place in a fantasy world. It's somewhere in England because it's dank, it's dreary. It kind of looks like Albuquerque the last 2 days. It rains continuously. The main character is a 40-year-old social worker at the Department of Magical, the department in charge of magical youth. So in this fantasy world, children who are born with magical powers are dangerous, and they are immediately removed from their families and put in orphanages. Think about like Miss Peregrine. It's kind of like that. And this man, Linus Baker, is a social worker, and his job is to go around and check up on kids in orphanages. He is totally a non-heroic hero. He is totally non-heroic. He's about 40, he's single, he's lonely, he has a cat, he's a little overweight, he doesn't have any friends. So one day, extremely upper management calls Linus into their office and this says, we have a chore for you. We have an assignment for you. We're going to send you to a particular orphanage on an island in the Cerulean Sea. And so Linus packs up his cat, his one remaining cat, and he heads off to this island. Well, Linus has always wanted to see the ocean and the sea, so he's a little bit happy to go. But when he gets to the island, he finds that this orphanage is run by a kind of a mysterious but charming man named Arthur Parnassus, and it's full of strangely magical children, the most magical of magical children. There's a green blob, sort of a formless green blob child, a gnome, a sprite, a wyvern. Instead of a werewolf, there's a were-Pomeranian. And the Antichrist actually lives there as a child. His name is Lucifer, but he goes by Lucy. And so Linus gets to this orphanage and is just appalled at all of these children. But as time goes on, he finds himself getting more and more engaged with them. And he actually falls in love with Arthur, the caretaker of the orphanage. So at one level, it's an adult love story. It's very gentle, it's very sweet. But these two men find a partnership and they become sort of fathers together at the end of this orphanage with these children. I loved it. I never give anything a 5. I loved it. I loved it. The writing is exquisite. The characters are beautiful. It's gentle. You find yourself kind of liking all of the characters as we go along. And at one level, it's just engaging on the fantasy. On another level, though, it's all about why we fear people and why we fear things that are not like us and what we can do about that and what these characters have done about it, because all of these magical children are there because they are not accepted. So The House in the Cerulean Sea, I highly recommend it. So grab it up, and I will turn it over to my friend Adrienne.
Thank you, Deborah. That book sounds really interesting. My second book is called Cinderella is Dead. A little bit of a glare on the screen. It's 200 years after Cinderella found her prince, but the fairy tale is over. Teen girls now are required to appear at the annual ball, and where men of the kingdom select wives based on how they look in their display of finery. If a suitable match is not found, all the girls that aren't chosen are never heard from again. No one knows what happens to them. 16-year-old Sophia would much rather marry Aaron, her childhood best friend, than parade in front of her suitors, but her parents kind of flip-flop back and forth between her mom and her dad and force her to go. At the ball, she makes the desperate decision to flee, and she finds herself hiding in Cinderella's mausoleum. And there she meets Constance, who's the last known descendant of Cinderella and her stepsisters. Together, they vow to bring down the king once and for all, and in the process, they learn there's more to Cinderella's story than they ever knew. So this book is a retelling on the Cinderella story with a lot of twists on the way. The main character, Sophia, is not Cinderella. Basically, she's the opposite of what Cinderella historically represents. She's the girl who doesn't wait for the fairy godmother, but charges after her instead. The one who, by her own admission, wants to be the one to rescue the princess and wants to be with the princess instead of the prince. The book has good character development and world building, touches on whitewashing history through the Cinderella tale, and it alludes to a lot of the things that African Americans generally have to face, from being treated like second-class citizens to the girls being taken from them under the guise of a better life. And there's a hair straightening scene where Sophia is told that straight hair is prettier than curls. I think that this book shows young girls, especially young Black girls and kids who are LGBTQ+, they can save the princess. They can be the hero of the story, even in the context of most famous of fairy tales, which are historically whitewashed and void of any LGBT themes. The one issue that I had with this book is the pacing. It seems a little off at times. Some of the travel scenes were really inconsistent, like she goes, 3 or 4 nights without sleeping, and they kind of don't explain that. I still recommended it, and I gave it a 7 out of 10. And now on to my friend Heather.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Heather, and I'm bringing you a book called The Shadow Wand by Laurie Forrest, and it's a part 3 in the Black Witch Chronicles. So the Black Witch Chronicles, the Black Witch is the first book, and the main character through the 3 books is Ellerin Gardner, and she's a Gardnerian, which is a kind of a species. So this is a fantasy story kind of placed amid all these almost racial, but it's like these hate wars, but it's like all these different species of people, but we're really all kind of the same. Ellerin's grandmother was the last great Black witch in the world. And at the beginning of the first story, you learn that her and her 2 brothers are being raised by her uncle, who's way hidden out in some tiny cottage in the forest. So because her parents died trying to fight against her grandmother, the Black Witch, because the Gardnerians are the majority society, and they kind of repress and control people. And so her uncle decided to whisk them away and have them grow up far, far away from that. And he, didn't teach them any magic or let them kind of come of age. And then when they get older and his health is ailing, they end up going to boarding school. She's the youngest, her 2 older brothers, they go to a boarding school. So it's kind of, if you love Harry Potter, this is a really good kind of spin on that. You can really geek out on the details and all the different species and who's an Icarel and a Selkie. And of course, Ellerin befriends everybody, but because she looks just like her grandma, who's this Black witch, and the prophecy says the next great Black witch is going to come back and it's going to tear apart the world. You don't know that she's the Black witch until book 3, and you still don't really know. I'm not all the way there yet, but you kind of feel like it. But there's this girl that's fighting against her that probably is going to be the Black witch, who's really evil. So you kind of hope Ellerin's going to be that. So I really love these stories. I think some people really geek out on details. I just love to be sucked into these stories. Book 1 was kind of slow. Book 2 went fast. It was better than book 1. And book 3 is actually I'm just kind of living with it for a while. I'll read a chapter or 2, read another book, read a chapter or 2, read a book. And it does a really good job of catching you back up to who was that dude again? That builds the character. So you don't have to reread book 1, which is always a bonus for me. So I really recommend, if you're looking for a big chunky series, The Black Witch, and book 3, The Shadow Wand, is just as good as book 1 and 2. And now back to Steve.
Okay, back to me. Next book is a Jason Reynolds book. So I've been kind of on this Jason Reynolds kick. I've read about 3 of his books in the last week and a half here. And this one is called Long Way Down. Highly recommend it. You can see it's won a bunch of awards. It really is worth the read. I read it in a day. I think even the most reluctant reader can burn through this book. It is written in verse, and that might be intimidating for some readers, because they might look at it and think, oh, it's kind of like poetry. But really, it's written in verse because it is stripped down to the bare bones. And this thing is like a perfect thriller, essentially, in a way. It's a long way down because the protagonist, his brother, he lives in a bad neighborhood, and his brother has been shot. And he contemplates how he's going to respond to that and get revenge, because he lays out what the rules are. Rule number 1, the rules of the neighborhood, no crying, no matter what, no snitching, no matter what, and revenge, no matter what. So it's this code that's ingrained in the mindset and the culture, and just if you're of the circumstances of being from the neighborhood, right? So his trip down the elevator is his whole contemplation and encounters, let's just say, with all these other people in his life, about the psychological experience he's going through to prep up is, what he's going to do about this and take vengeance or not. It really ends up being, on one level, a statement about the circumstances and conditions of young Black people, young Black males living in rough neighborhoods in America and inner cities and stuff. And then just a great like suspense book. So this is a great start for Jason Reynolds. I think a great introduction. You'll see like why you'll want to read other books of his because he just makes characters very relatable. At the same time, you're just drawn in and connecting to the character, but then you're seeing he's really touching on an important social issue. So that's what I like about Jason Reynolds. So in closing, looking back at our book talks tonight, I guess I was a little bit of an odd man out here because both books I picked were realistic fiction, and we had a lot of other fantasy type books talked about tonight. But it made me think that regardless of genre or regardless of setting, whatever it is that draws you into a book, I mean, because we always, one of our main themes in this club, right, is we advocate for is there's a book for everyone, right? And everybody could find a book. There's a book for everyone. So despite the setting or whatever it is that draws you to the book, gravitate towards that because you will find out each book has something important to say. As I was listening to all these talks tonight, whether it was wrapped up in a nautical world or a retelling of the Cinderella story or like a witch fantasy story or the House of the Cerulean Sea, or not quite sure the title on that exactly, but when I heard everybody talk tonight, there seems to be some deeper underlying thing that the author has to say. And ultimately, isn't that what the great experience of reading books is? That discourse, that thing that you could walk away with, like the author's message, right? And when you engage in a couple hundred pages, it's like a long conversation you have with the author, and you walk away just having a real clear impression of what they had to tell you through the story. And I think that's fascinating. And that is, if you can find a book that you like, you're going to walk away with something important. So as we were doing that, I was finishing up a sketch that I drew, a little cat sketch to show you guys. The greatest thing you'll ever learn is to love and be loved in return, and read great books. So continue to find books that just, gravitate towards what you like, and you will find great books. Okay. Good to see you guys. Have a good night.
Good night, everybody. Make sure you keep reading your books.
Mhm.